Welcome to Hometown Salutes. My name is Sherry Kendall, and today I have my good friend Sam Harvey. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's tell us about yourself. What year did you go into the service, and what branch of service were you in?
Well, I enlisted in 1971, and I first joined U.S. Army Reserve Postal Unit in Rushville.
Okay.
And then later, after about a year and a half, I transferred to the Aviation Brigade at Shelbyville with the aircraft.
Oh, wow.
And had an opportunity to go over there and saw more opportunities for advancement at that time.
Okay. So did you come from a military family?
Well, my dad was a World War II veteran and was in the South Pacific with the Navy. He was on an LST, which is a landing craft. There is one down at Evansville, and they had steamed that up to Aurora. And my late brother and I went down to see how Dad lived on that. And not a very big ship to be out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean if you can navigate it up and down the Ohio River. So it was very interesting to see that and to see how that greatest generation won the war and preserved freedom for the rest of us.
Yes. So is that ship, you can go to that in Evansville?
Yes. The LST Association had gotten that ship. It was part of the Greek Navy, and they were scrapping them out. There were none left in the United States, and there were a group of sailors that had been on LSTs. They went over and got it running and brought it back from Greece across the Atlantic Ocean, and it has its permanent port now in Evansville. So I would encourage anybody that likes naval or military things to go down and see that. It's truly worth your time to go visit. It's nominal cost to get in, just to help pay for the maintenance on it.
Oh, wow. That's something I'm going to have to do. So did you enlist or were you drafted? Well,
I was about to be drafted. My lottery number was in the low 30s, and I knew that it was just a matter of time. So I actively sought out a reserve or National Guard unit, and at that time there were waiting lists. And it's not that I wouldn't go, but it was the height of Vietnam, and at that time, there was war protests, and it was just a very unpopular war. But I think one that we needed to fight to win, that we didn't fight to win. But I certainly salute all those that did serve there. But I saw this as my legal alternative, and so glad that I did, because I ended up spending 24 years in the military.
Wow, 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So you did basic training, then where did you do that?
I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and got out there in late January, and I was there for 8 weeks in February and March. There was snow and ice on the ground, I remember when I got there, and but they worked you hard enough that out marching and doing PT that you really didn't feel the cold, and by the time I got out, it was starting to be spring, by the time I left basic training.
Wow. So then after basic training, you were sent to advanced individual training?
Yes.
AIT?
AIT at Fort Harrison, Fort Benjamin Harrison, because then I was still part of the postal detachment in Rushville, and I went to postal school to learn how to be an Army postman.
Oh, wow.
And which was kind of neat to be at Fort Harrison, because that was just like being at home. I was able to have my car there, came home on the weekends, and bring my laundry home on Wednesday nights. My mother would wash it for me.
Nice. So then you were in Rushville,
mm-hmm.
and then an opportunity came up for you to transfer to Shelbyville?
Yes.
So was that a good move for you?
Yeah, it was a tremendous move. People that I met there and the things that I learned, and leadership positions that I was given that carried me through life. I think the things that I've learned through the military, and the discipline that it teaches you, but the supervisory skills that I learned there, I think, have been very important over the years as well. And just a great group of people in the aviation brigade over there that highly trained, highly qualified people. You know, if you're flying a multi-million-dollar helicopter, helicopters are very hard to fly. I was not a pilot. I'm not a pilot, but being associated with those people, I have a lot of respect for their knowledge and for the skill that it takes to do that. Now, I was part of maintenance and supply, and I had several jobs there. So we had to be very professional as well. The mechanics that worked for me, they always, one thing that impressed me, they were taught to always have the manual out whenever they were working on aircraft, and to go by the manual. Even though they might have done it 100 times, you still check off every time you do something and follow that manual. So attention to detail is one thing that the military teaches.
So you had mentioned to me when we had talked earlier that that a lot of the reserves did not take the job serious, but then you mentioned that when President Reagan came into office, that the reserves got a lot more serious. So why was that?
Well, I think that he believed in peace through strength, and I think that it came down from on high, from the Pentagon, that we were to train and be proficient just as our regular Army counterparts were and are today. So it was no more just going through the motions, that we had to meet physical training, PT tests. We had to have height and weight standards that the regular military did. And then when we would go to annual training, we would have, before that we called it summer camp. When President Reagan came along, it became annual training then, because we were expected to know and to do our job in a proficient manner. And we would have regular Army evaluators evaluate us, and more times than not, they said that we were combat ready and that they would go to war with us. So I think the National Guard and the Army Reserve, the Reserve sometimes got a bad name, but all in all, it's not the case. And if you look today, for the last, since Desert Shield, Desert Storm, there have been so many of National Guard and reservists that have served overseas and have given their life that no longer can they be thought of as just weekend warriors.
So the training was just as intense. I mean, right? I mean,
every bit as intense.
So you did it in a shorter amount of time?
Yes, and we were expected, we took correspondence classes through the military. We would have to work out on our own in order to meet the physical standards and to pass the PT tests. It wasn't just while we were at the Armory or the Reserve Center. We had to do it, had to work out on our own and make sure that we were meeting those standards.
Wow, yeah, because you would never know if you were going to get deployed or not.
That's
so
right.
You needed to be ready. So you were in during the end of the Vietnam era and during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, right? So you were never deployed in the 24 years, but your group was ready to go.
We were ready to go and would have gone. In fact, we were at a safety stand down at Shelbyville High School, and Francis A. Hughes, two-star general, came in, and he had been our brigade commander previously, and we all knew him. But he came in and said that that the president had called and talked to the governor and wanted us, this would have been the first President Bush, called Governor By and wanted the aviation brigade out of Shelbyville to go to the Gulf. And supposedly, this is according to General Hughes, that Governor By said, you take the whole 38th Infantry Division, the whole state of Indiana, I want you to take that and not just the aviation brigade. Well, they elected not to take us, but we were ready to go. And, we were watching this on TV every night as that war unfolded and would have gone. I just felt like that because so many of us had been together for so long that we really truly knew each other, and I think that added to the strength that we would have had we been deployed. And I think those that followed after I retired and ended up in Iraq and Afghanistan probably felt the same way, because they'd been together for a number of years, and they knew each other well, and it becomes like family.
Yeah, sure. Wow. So let's talk about at the Shelbyville facility. It's a state-of-the-art facility, and you oversaw the fueling and refueling of aircrafts, and that was pretty dangerous.
Pretty dangerous.
Tell us a little bit about that.
That was one of my last assignments over there. I had several others, but I had what was called the headquarters platoon, and I had the mess hall. I had the motor pool. I had crash rescue, which would have been like a fire department. What am I missing? Company supply, as well as the refuelers. We would go to the field, Grayling, Michigan, or Camp Atterbury here in Indiana, and set up what was called a FARP, a Forward Area Refueling and Rearming Point, I think is what all that stood for. The Army's really good with acronyms. But we would hot refuel helicopters, which means that they would come in and land, blades spinning, and we would run out, and my guys would run out and refuel them hot. So at times, there was one time I know that we had 6 fueling points, and we had 6 aircraft on the ground and 6 right behind them, and guys would run out, refuel them, they would take off, and the next 6 would leapfrog forward. So very exciting, really get the adrenaline pumping. We had a chaplain came out, Chaplain Rob Barlow came out. He's a pastor, a Baptist pastor over in Shelby County now. Came out and he says, watched us for a while, and he says, "This has to be the most dangerous thing we do on purpose." And I said, "Yes, sir." And it was, but it was I guess exhilarating.
Yeah. Wow. So what is one thing that you did in the service that you are so proud of?
Well, one thing I did was I recruited a young man by the name of Brian Copes, and he was a senior, and I can tell this story because he's told it many times publicly, but he was a senior at Brookville High School, and he and his girlfriend and soon-to-be wife were going to have a baby. And I worked with his mother at H.H. Robertson, and she said, "We don't know, he doesn't have any insurance." And I said, if he joined the National Guard, and he was gone to basic training or AIT when the baby was born, that he would, that the military, the government would probably pay for that. So made arrangements to come over to Shelbyville, and he ended up enlisting, and all that happened. He got a full-time job there and rose through the ranks and became a staff sergeant and training NCO there, and was a very, very smart young man. In the meantime, he finished high school, got his diploma, started taking night classes, and later decided that he wanted to be a pilot. Well, but first he went to officer candidate school, became a second lieutenant, went off to flight school, learned to fly helicopters.
Wow.
Rose through the ranks and retired a couple years ago as a one-star general. And he invited me to his pinning when he was pinned a general, and then when he retired. And I just felt honored that to have been included. But a true friend and a soldier's soldier. I think because he spent a number of years as an enlisted man, made him a much better officer. And
wow.
He's retired now and does volunteer work, and just a tremendous man. So that's one thing that I'm very proud of, having been associated with him and having helped him get his start.
Wow,
in the military.
Really neat. So what is one funny memory that you can recall from being in the military that you'd like to share?
Well, the first year I was in, after I got out of AIT and I was still part of the postal unit in Rushville, we went to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, to run the post office there for 2 weeks for the annual training. We only had, because there were, I'm thinking only 12 or 15 in that unit. It was a very small unit. We only had one military vehicle. Well, the person that was in charge of that vehicle, we were always required, when the vehicle was not being used and there was no one around it, you would take a chain that was welded to the floor and wrap around the steering wheel and put a padlock through that. So it didn't have keys. You wouldn't have keys to military vehicles, but that way nobody could just get in it and drive off. Well, someone forgot to do that, and so the MPs came and got it, towed it off, drove it off, and called up and said, "We have your vehicle, and you can get it after a certain amount of time." Well, the MPs, we were there for 2 weeks, and this happened early in the first week. Because we were in control of the mail, MPs didn't get their mail till towards the end of the following week when we got our truck back.
Oh my gosh.
So I probably wasn't the right thing to do, but I found that kind of humorous.
That is funny. That was really funny. So I see you have a pin in your jacket.
Yes, very proud of that. This meritorious service ribbon. I received that when I retired. Colonel Jessup, the brigade commander, pinned that on to me. MSR is highest non-combat medal or ribbon that you can receive, and I wear that with pride every time I have on a suit jacket. So.
Sure. Wow, that's neat. So do you keep in contact with, through social media, I guess?
Through social media. There are some guys that live here in town, and I see occasionally, but having gone to Shelbyville for all those years, most of them were from there or other places around the state, and of course, as we've gotten older, many of them have retired, but I see them on Facebook, and a group of us got together a couple years ago down at Camp Atterbury at the fire station down there, and had a good time, and got to see some of the modern equipment, and so yeah, it's good, and probably on a daily basis, I see posts from many of the guys that I serve with, and I say guys. There were some gals too. They were, women were just starting to be more and more a part of the military, and we had some terrific ladies as well that were pretty good pilots. And,
right. Well, that's good. So, I mean, you would encourage everybody to join?
Absolutely, absolutely. Young people, it's a great career. I talk about this in other ways too. That we push our kids towards college, and not everybody is ready to go to college or needs to go to college. But I would suggest that young people consider the military. They go in GI Bill after they get out, or while they're even in, they can take collegiate classes, and the government will pay for it once you've been in and you get out. So they go to school that way, and maybe not even to college, just to technical trade school of some kind. And you can learn so much of those kind of trades while you're in the military and get credit for that as well. So it's very good. I've been blessed since I retired to the biggest thing is the health insurance that's been afforded me by being a 20-year plus member of the military, a retired member. So I hear people that say that still have eligibility time left say, "Man, I wish I'd have stayed in." I said, "Well, maybe you ought to go back because of the benefits once you get to that 20-year point, that the benefits that you can receive."
Wow. And you were 24 years, right?
I was there for 24 years. I retired in 1995, in November of 95. And man, it seems like yesterday. And I think it was time, although there were a lot of things that I miss about it. And a lot of it is the camaraderie and being with people of like mind.
Sure. Do you have any involvement here in town at this National Guard Armory?
No, I don't. And really, over the years, didn't know many of the people up there. I know they do a fine job here, and great group of guys. I know just because it being now, when I went in, the draft was on, but now those that serve certainly serve voluntarily. That nobody twisted their arm to go in, and
so drafted now.
Right. So it's I got all the respect in the world for those folks.
Right. So, is there anything that you would like to talk about as far as like with your dad being in the service? I mean, that kind of put you towards that direction. Did your dad talk about his time in the service? Because he was
Navy, South Pacific, World War II. Not a whole lot. In his later years, he did, and I think a lot of the World War II guys were that way. That they just saw things that maybe they didn't want to talk about. But Dad did talk about. My mom talked about that. The LSTs were. Most of them were made along the Ohio River, and his was made in Pittsburgh. Down at Jeffersonville, they built a lot of them, and there were others, other ports on the river where these ships were built. But Dad somehow got word to my mom that at a certain time that his ship would be going downstream on the Ohio River. So my brother was just a baby, and Mom and my grandma and grandpa, her mom and dad, took them down to the Ohio River down by Cincinnati, and Dad got to come up on deck. He was electrician's mate underneath, and he got to come up on deck and wave at them as the ship went down the Ohio River. And I think that was pretty cool. In that, when you think about communication, then was mostly just handwritten letters.
Right.
That in the 40s, people didn't have phones. Certainly didn't have the kind of communication that we have now. So I've thought about that a lot and how neat that was. And then all those years later, when my brother and I went down to Aurora, when they brought that LST up from Evansville, that it was pretty close to where he'd seen Dad. Down on the river.
Your parents were married when he was in the service?
Mm-hmm. And of course, they took him at World War II. That's the way it was. Another thing that he told me, and he didn't talk a whole lot about it, but after the war was over, or about over, after the bombs had been dropped on Japan, that they steamed into port in Japan, and they were anchored there, and at mess, when they were done, they would throw the garbage and the food overboard, which is what they did when they were at sea. But young Japanese children would be on the piers, and they would see that food being thrown overboard, and they would dive in to get the food. So once they saw that, then they started inviting the children on board to eat with them. So, it's just, that had to be heart-wrenching for them.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of our greatest generations for sure. Yes. What they did.
I just wish that they had, before Dad passed. I wish he could have been on one of those honor flights, or could have gone, but his health got to where he couldn't when after they built the memorial, and why it took so long. He never got to go.
Have you been out there to DC?
Yes, but not to see that. So, but I want to. I've been to the Vietnam Wall, which is very moving for my generation.
Very moving.
One thing Dad did do, and I still get things from email every once in a while, but the LST Association, he went to a couple conventions and hooked up with some of the guys that he was on board with. So,
really?
Yeah. So got reacquainted in his later years.
That's neat. Well, that's really neat. Well, that's awesome that you've made a career out of it, of 24 years. I want to thank you for your service and your sacrifice. I also want to thank you for taking time today to come out and see me.
Well, I appreciate being asked, and one thing I would like to say, me being part-time, I had a lot of soldiers that had come back from Vietnam that worked for me, and I had the utmost respect, and sometimes I felt like, why am I supervising somebody that's been there and been in combat? But it was just part of it. They respected me, and excuse me, and I certainly respected them and their service and all that they sacrificed.
Yeah, because when they came back, they sure weren't treated very well by anybody.
No, they weren't. Nobody was thanking them for their service. And when people say that to me now, it just means so much. And I feel like that just being part-time was not anything like what those guys had done. But yet I'm very proud of the time that I spent.
Well, you should be. I mean, you were ready to go. I mean,
right.
You were sacrificing whatever it took.
I think I told you to use a sports analogy. It's kind of like being on a basketball team and sitting at the end of the bench and never getting into the game at times, but always being ready and having practiced and being ready to go.
Speaking of sports analogy, so you've been the official Spartan of the radio station for how many years?
Well, I have been privileged to just finish my 29th season on the air.
Really?
With the Spartans, and yeah, what
That's
fun that's been. And for the last 10 or 11 years, I've taken over the play-by-play, and really never had any training in that, but had some good guys that I worked with over the years that taught me a lot about broadcasting, and continue to have fun and doing it, and hope that I continue doing that for years to come.
Wow, that's really neat. Well, you do a lot for the community. You do a lot for us here in Fayette County, and I just want to thank you again for your service and your sacrifice, and I especially thank you for your friendship.
Thank you.
So be sure to tune in next month for another Hometown Salutes. I'm Sherry Kendall, and I'll see you then.